The real reason men get stuck after infidelity is an effort. It's that most men were never taught how to process emotions. Men don't lack emotions. They lack permission, language, and practice. Culturally, men are taught to survive emotionally, not process. Stop crying, suck it up, handle it, move on. That training starts early. What isn't learned early doesn't magically appear in adulthood. But here's the part that matters, especially for the hurt partner. A lack of emotional skill does not remove responsibility. Men are still fully responsible for the choices they make. They are still responsible for the betrayal. They are still responsible for the repair. Struggles emotionally does not mean a partner has to tolerate the damage that struggle causes. After infidelity, this gap becomes impossible to ignore. Faithful partners are trying. They're being transparent. They're showing up. They're doing what they're told. But internally, they're overwhelmed and unprepared. They default to doing instead of feeling, fixing instead of understanding, managing instead of owning. And for the hurt partner, that feels hollow, because what she's responding to is an effort. She's responding to the absence of death. She can feel when he understands this in his head and hasn't felt it. And when that happens, his effort feels surface and unsafe. That doesn't make her unreasonable. It makes her perceptive. This emotional gap costs men dearly. Inside, there's a part of life they miss. They miss the opportunity to understand themselves. They miss the intimacy that only comes from honesty. They miss the emotional closeness they claim they want. They miss the version of their partner who trusted them. And most devastating of all, they miss the opportunity to evolve into the man they were supposed to become. Infidelity doesn't just break the relationship. It exposes the emotional childhood many men never outgrew. And the truth is this: a man can't repair what he broke until he's willing to sit in what he feels, until he's willing to let his ego die, until he's willing to face the version of himself he spent his whole life avoiding. Because healing after infidelity isn't about saying, "I'm sorry." It's about becoming a man who would never do it again. Not because he fears losing her, but because he finally understands what losing himself truly means. But here's the part almost no one talks about: the secret fracture inside a man after he cheats. He doesn't just break her heart. He breaks the image he had of himself. Men rarely understand this at first. They think infidelity is just an action, a mistake, a moment of weakness. But the deeper consequence is internal. A man who sees himself as good now has to reconcile being the source of someone else's deepest wound. Most men are not emotionally equipped for that level of self-confrontation. So instead of going inward, they go outward. They distract. They deny. They minimize. They get defensive. They rewrite the timeline. They blame immaturity, stress, temptation, or not thinking clearly. They explain the cheat, but never explore it. This is how emotional avoidance becomes emotional damage. Because until a man sits with his own darkness, until he looks in the mirror and sees the version of himself capable of causing devastation, he cannot truly change. He cannot repair the relationship, and he cannot earn trust again. What faithful partners feel, deep in their bones, is this lack of internal reckoning. She can sense when he is sorry for the consequences, but not sorry for the wound. She can feel when he regrets getting caught, more than he regrets betraying her. She can tell when he's focused on comfort instead of accountability. And this is where the emotional disconnect becomes unbearable. She's drowning in pain while he's rearranging the furniture around the flood. He doesn't realize that she doesn't need him to fix the relationship. She needs him to face himself. Because true repair doesn't come from, "I'm sorry, I'll do better." It won't happen again. Those are surface-level promises. Real repair comes from, I finally understand what my actions did to you. I see the pain I caused. I'm not running from this anymore. I am willing to feel the weight of my decisions. I am doing the emotional work to become a man who deserves you. That is what makes a woman feel safe again. But most men don't get there, because getting there requires emotional courage. It requires entering the parts of themselves they were taught to lock away. Shame, fear, grief, insecurity, inadequacy. Infidelity forces a man to confront all of it, and that's why so many men feel stuck. Not because they don't care, but because caring requires feeling, and feeling requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires unlearning everything they were taught about manhood. Here's the truth that hits hardest. A man cannot heal a wound he refuses to acknowledge, and he cannot rebuild trust while protecting his ego. For the faithful partner, that emotional mismatch is soul-crushing. She becomes the emotional leader, carrying the relationship while also carrying her heartbreak. And that imbalance becomes its own trauma. But for the man, the cost is even deeper than he realizes. He loses the woman who loved him purely. He loses the version of her that trusted him effortlessly. He loses the emotional closeness he took for granted. He loses the opportunity to grow into a better man. Infidelity is not just a relationship rupture. It is a confrontation with self. And the men who rise from it are the ones who stop hiding behind effort and start healing through emotion. Because the truth is simple. You can't rebuild intimacy with half your heart closed. You can't rebuild trust with your ego running the show. And you can't repair a relationship until you repair the parts of yourself that broke it.